Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. Be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. Mike, got a ton to delve into as the Saints begin their march toward cap, what we say, compliance. So let's start, I guess, with the news today, and then we'll move backwards. Thomas Morstead is the big name and the latest to be pink slipped. Probably not a surprise, but your reaction today to the Saints moving on from Morstead?
Yeah, that's really not a surprise. It was funny last year during training camp. Coach Payton a number of times had brought up, the punter from Penn State, Blake Gillikin.
Mm-hmm.
He makes the 53-man squad. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, but when they originally cut down to 53, Blake was on it, along with Morstead. And then he got put to IR afterwards. But that sort of was telling you, and you knew that eventually this was going to happen, that's going to come a time. And I had one Saints assistant coach tell me this last summer. He's like, man, every year we walk right up to the brick wall, salary cap-wise. We walk right up to the wall.
Mm.
But he said, 2021, we running into the wall. He said, there's no way around it. We got to win it this year because he said, we got some tough cuts that we're going to have to make in the offseason. And he's absolutely right. And certainly Thomas is one of them. He goes down as one of the best draft day trades Sean Payton ever made. I think about we're doing it. At this time, I'm doing it with Mark Shafisi.
Oh, yeah?
Mark and I are handling the coverage late. Now, he's a big wheel now. He sells real estate. So
he ain't making radio money no more. He's making real estate
No, man.
money.
He ain't got that shoe money no more. It's boot money. You got to have a boot to carry that money in the real estate business. But whatever. So we're doing it, and we see the Saints move up to get Morstead. In that particular year, it was him and Kevin Huber, who was from Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, and got picked by the Bengals. And then the Saints trade up for Morstead. Man, listen, we opened up the phone lines. People raising all kind of sand. The Saints trading up for a punter. What is Sean doing?
I said the same.
But there are certain people that made an impact on your football team, and Thomas was that. He was a tremendous punter. He also did a little bit of kickoffs for a while, and we will all remember Ambush and how that did not work in practice, but it worked in the game. You would figure. They always thought, practice makes you perfect. It never worked in practice. But Sean called it during the game. Thought he had a shot. Needed to steal a possession from Peyton Manning, and he got it. And how that worked. And Thomas has really been model of consistency up until 2020. And, he's admitted, and I first heard it from Zach. Zach was the first one to tell me, Thomas is battling a back injury. Mm. And and you could tell by his punting he wasn't the same guy. Even the holes, for kicks, there were some issues there. So you could almost see this day coming, but, you go back. And I remember the Saints playing the Patriots a couple years back. And Bill Belichick opening up his press conference, didn't talk about Drew Brees, didn't talk about anybody else. You know what he talked about first? Thomas Morstead. Man, listen, you say, believe what you want to believe about Belichick, say what you want to say, but you would be wrong if you said he wasn't the greatest head football coach in pro football in our lifetime. And he opens it up about Morstead. That's how much respect he had for Thomas. He did not have a good season last year on his, level. And so you saw this coming. And Thomas will kick again one day, in the NFL. He's going to sign with another team. The funniest thing about it is all this hand-wringing and people screaming and hollering about Morstead. The next night, we get June Jones on. And June coached him at SMU. Him and Bob were tight, because he coached Bobby in Atlanta. But before we did the interview, I'd called him, make sure everything was okay with, the time frame. And he's like, hey, let me tell you something about Morstead. he's the best punter I've ever had. I said, in the college ranks? He said, no, ever. I've never been on a team with a better punter than Thomas Morstead. Man, June had coached quite a few years when he was telling us this. No, June's no young guy. No, he ain't no young buck, in the barn, so to speak. So when he said that, that was high praise coming from June, that he was the best punter he had seen at the college or professional level. And so, listen, we knew this was coming. There's more to come down the line. And this team trying to get down to what they have to get to. There's some restructuring that has to be done also with some players. But you know what? You knew this moment would happen. For the last 3 years, they've chips in. It's a poker game, all chips in. And you didn't win the pot because you didn't win the championship.
Yeah.
It's not that you didn't try, but you didn't win it. So now, you know what? You play another hand. That's just the way it is in the NFL. There's only one winner and 31 losers, so to speak. Because even the Super Bowl champ, man, he feel like he's been kicked in the teeth. When you lose a Super Bowl game, all this stuff about getting there. People used to tell it to my dad when he was still alive. I just want to see the Saints get there. My dad is, get there. Man, what? You going to get there and not win?
Yep.
Come on. You feel lousy, don't you? At the end of that game, you did get there, but, there's no sort of consolation prize. They don't hand you the big trophy at the end. That's all I know. And so, listen, he done a great job. Again, it's one of the best draft day trades. And look at sustained success that Morstead had over that period of time when he was one of the league's elite punters. He certainly made his impact on this football team. But you know what? Father Time, he does wear the championship belt for a reason.
No doubt.
He ain't never been beat. He ain't never been tied. He walks that mountain alone. And, he walks on top of that mountain alone. So I think Thomas, again, he'll kick somewhere in the NFL. But finances certainly were a big part of this. And I think, too, is coaching staff have, because Sean doesn't really say, if he doesn't believe it, I don't think he says it. And he got no patience with kickers. He's just like his mentor Parcells.
Right.
He got no patience with him. But 3 or 4 times during the sessions had with him, he would bring up Blake's name. And, that sort of catches my eye. Almost the same way he talks about Carl Granderson. And he's brought it up to us in the coaches shows a couple of 3 times about Granderson, of how much he likes him, as a pass rusher, and that he's got his weight right and everything else. So be interesting to see this year with Gilligan and how well, Blake can take over that spot, which is some big moccasins to fill. And, he brings it up every week about field position. And, again, Gilligan is one of those type of guys that, he sets it up with the punting. And now I think they'll certainly bring someone else in to compete with Blake. But I think it's his job to lose.
Another layer to the Russell Wilson conversation. Thoughts there with the report today from Diana?
Okay, isn't that the same thing we talked about last week? This is a divorce. Okay, that stuff came out a couple weeks ago. Where do you think that came from? That came from the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, these insiders are not going to tell you, I got it from somebody with the Seahawks. But come on, that first report from Seattle that there was maybe a little bit of friction there, that came directly from Seattle. They wanted that out first. Then all of a sudden, Russell Wilson, he goes on TV on Dan Patrick. And he flips the card saying, hey, listen, we need help along the offensive line. Seattle was putting that out for a reason. They wanted some dialogue between different teams on what sort of compensation. This is a divorce, as I told you last week. Mm-hmm. It just depends on when they sign the papers, okay? The divorce is going to happen between 2 guys here whose struggle over power and control has drawn the rift between the 2 of them. It's similar to what happened in New England a year ago between Brady and Belichick. Very similar in that, okay, we can't live with each other. So we better start learning how to live without each other. But I want compensation, okay? I want something back. And so, in essence, this is confirming everything we talked about last week, that the Seahawks, come on. To say that they're not listening, that's like the Texans saying they're not listening to offers for Deshaun Watson. Okay? I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid. If somebody's calling you about Watson, you listening. Now, I can say anything I want to any of these reporters. And I don't have to tell you the truth, so to speak, if I'm the Seahawks or the Texans or anybody. I don't have to tell. There is no bylaws that say I have to tell you what I'm doing. I'm doing what I want to do. And it is obvious that this rift has happened between Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson, and it seems to be unrepairable at this particular stage. And so you move on, see what you can get as far as compensation, and you're going to get a lot. And I know we talked about it last week, but I'll repeat it. If I'm the Saints, I move whatever heavy equipment I can to get him. There are a few people that I'm not willing to give up, but there's a lot I am willing to give up because he keeps me relevant at the most critical position on the team. Now, for some, because of the fact they in the Jameis Winston camp or they're in the Taysom Hill camp, to say I'm right about them, they're steadfast. Some of them even today. And I don't want Russell Wilson. He ain't no better than Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. And my answer is, you got to be kidding me. Okay? You need the smelling salts if you believe that, because you living in another world to believe it. If I've got an opportunity to pick up a star quarterback, I do what I have to do to see if I can make it work. Now, it may be too expensive, Matt. It may come to the point, okay, I'll throw this out. And I'll just throw out numbers to be numbers. Okay. If I had $500,000 to spend on a house, and that's my budget, but I find a house that's worth $700, and they want $780 for it. And I said, man, that's my dream house. That's what I would want. Am I willing to spend another, say, close to $300,000 on it?
Yep.
You know, and do you because you know what? When you're going to buy the $500,000 house, you're probably going to put another $250,000 in it to begin
right.
with. Because listen, all of us have been through it. I know I have. In 3 different renovations of my home. I would never do it again because I would buy another house. I've spent way too much money on this one. And listen, we enjoy where we live and everything else. But still, to think about it, it's really worth it in the long run, because when you're going to look at what you have to give up, unless it's really excessive, Russell Wilson on this football team keeps you relevant. Mm-hmm. And he not only wins you games in the regular season. I think Taysom, he's shown he can win games in the regular season. Jameis Winston has shown he can win games in the regular season. My thing about it is, I want a guy that can win me games in January. And there are only a handful of those guys out there that you can say, with the right pieces around him, he gives me a shot to do that in January. And so what Diana reported is no surprise to me. It'll be interesting to see the offers. I think some of the teams that his agent brought up are a little bogus because, I think, they got their own issues trying to do certain things.
Like what teams?
Come on, look at the Cowboys.
I think they're all bogus, Mike. Why would Russell Wilson want to go to any of those teams if the Saints are on the board? They're the only team that's been a consistent winner in the last decade.
Well, the only thing with Chicago, it's a big platform for him, being in the Midwest. There are some advantages off the field, Matt. Come on, you have to admit.
Sure, but if this is just a play, Mike, where he goes, I want to go and have a good offensive system centered around me where I can win. I mean, that's it, Mike. That's different if you're talking about all the off the field opportunities for sure.
And that's what the agent, I think, is bringing up, that a Las Vegas. And listen, Gruden, he would never be satisfied if he had Patrick Mahomes. He would bitch that Patrick Mahomes, he can't throw the football left-handed real well. He always have a complaint. He is the biggest complainer as a head coach for quarterbacks that I've ever heard in my life, and he's never developed one.
Oh, man.
He's never developed one of them, but he falls in love with all of them. It's almost like the guy that's on the dating scene, and he goes out with a gal once or twice. He falls in love with her until he meets the next gal, and then he's in love with her, and he goes out, a couple of times, and he's in love with someone else. That's Gruden, the way he is with quarterbacks. He's always been that way. He's not going to change. Even if he had Russell Wilson, there's still going to be the complaint, with him. Dallas is intriguing because of what you can do off the field. Because no matter what, it puts you on a super high platform. And you've got some issues now trying to work things out with Dak. And that's not an issue of money, but more of time on the contract. That's where the, kind of rubber has met the road. It's not so much money, but I think it's so much how many years on the contract. Chicago puts him on another platform, but he does have a lot of weapons.
Mm-hmm.
If he thought he was void of weapons in Seattle, let him go to Chicago and see what happens there. And he's got a coach and a GM that's on the hot seat. And so, in essence, they're trying to steal a little bit of the Brady blueprint of, come on, does that coach and GM in Tampa stay in place if they were 8-8?
No.
Come on, they're out. They're out. And come on, even Bruce admitted it. I don't do nothing. I'm just the CEO. The other guy's coach. And I sort of just run the team. From the top of the ladder. So you understand that you got to win. And all I can tell you is, man, with Nagy and Ryan Pace, they're just fortunate that I think they have ownership that's sort of old school that would give them another opportunity. I think a younger owner, they're both out after this year. I think both of them would have been gone. So that's part of the maybe thing to try to lure, that maybe we can catch the lightning in a bottle like what the Bucks did. And for the Saints, it keeps you relevant.
Yeah.
It keeps you sort of at the top of the hill. And now what do you do in the division? In the NFC South, you don't know what's going to happen in Carolina, but you know one thing. Teddy Bridgewater ain't starting that quarterback for them when they start the season. It's either going to be a veteran quarterback or it's going to be a rookie. It's going to be one of the two. Atlanta's got Matt Ryan. The Bucks have Brady. If you're the Saints, and at times you could go kind of toe for toe with everybody, or you had the best when Breeze was in his prime. Now, it's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
At the most critical position on the football team, again, it's going to come down to cost factor. Because to me, financially, if you want to make it work, you find a way. You find a way to make it work financially. It's just the compensation you could have to give up to get Russell. But, Matt, I don't think we're going to have to wait real long for this. I think that the rubber's met the road now, that I think Seattle feels maybe it's the time to strike now before all this sets in with the new league season and everything else, and there's going to be a lot of movement, going to be a lot of veterans get released, and we want to be in the mix with that too. So I suspect the divorce won't take long to happen.
Making our way through a ton of Saints conversations. Thomas Morstead released today, a day after both Jared Cook and Josh Hill were released. Mike, I got to get a thought on that. You and I talked a lot throughout the year about Adam Troutman and them getting him more involved.
Yeah.
But, Mike, it's really hard to believe that Troutman's going to be the only guy at tight end next year. So if you would, help us make sense of this and what next year maybe looks like.
Well, you're going to have to bring in another tight end, bottom line. And I'll think a lot of Adam, and I think he's got a chance to be a pretty doggone good starting tight end in this league. The Saints use a lot of multiple tight end sets, and so that tells me that there's another guy to be added to the roster, either via the draft, trade, free agency, whatever. Cook was no surprise. He's been a major disappointment. He came here after 2 really good seasons with the Raiders, had high hopes for him because he seemed to be such a good fit. He had matured, and you know what? He looked a lot like the the Jared Cook I saw with the Titans, because, having to do work with the Titans network, he looked a lot like the same guy I saw there. At times would flash it, would make a great play, a great catch, and then drops an easy catch. And what sealed his fate certainly was the fumble against the Bucs, which really momentum swung dramatically at that particular point in time. So that sort of sealed it. But he had sort of phantom years on that contract to begin with, and you knew they were going to move on. Josh Hill is a guy that I know Coach Payton likes a lot. He has spoke about, kind of the hidden stuff with Josh, of how good of a blocker he is as a downfield blocker, as an inline blocker, his pass protection skills. He was solid as a receiver. Now, he ain't out racing you or me.
He might outrace me. He might get me, Mike.
And he'd probably get me, too. I'm just joking. No, he would get both of us. But, he's no speed burner by any stretch. And we've all seen that little tight end screen. It was like, man, come on. That ain't going anywhere. But, man, listen, he gave you everything he had. And he's also, too, a really good special teams player. And Coach would always bring it up about his special teams work, the grunt work that you have to do at a tight end as being a blocker and everything. If things don't work out, I could see you going back to Josh. But I don't know what the market is going to be for him. A lot of people try to connect him to Detroit, but my thing is they have T.J. Hawkinson, who's really one of the top young tight ends in pro football today. Now, he's sort of lost in Detroit, but, man, that guy can play. He's a big-time player. So I wouldn't exactly close the door on Josh, because I think he sort of knows. He knows the system here, and if things don't work out somewhere else, that possibility of him coming back, Cook, he's going somewhere else. So that didn't – the Hill came as a little bit of a surprise to me, because I know his value as a blocker and special teams, that sort of thing. And he really was a Sean Payton favorite, almost from day one when he was in camp. Sean talked up about him. So that to me was a little bit of a surprise. But again, of all the kind of cuts and releases, that was the surprise to me. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't Cook. The restructuring part, that sort of thing. None of that is any surprise. But Josh, just because of the way Coach had talked about him, you knew he was a favorite. And maybe, like I said, we maybe revisit Josh Hill again somewhere down the line. The stuff about Malcom Brown, listen, because I was told, I got to bring this up. Man, and I read this stuff about, the Saints are shopping Malcom, and I can understand that. Malcom Brown is a really good football player, okay? He does a lot of grunt work. He's a guy that ties up a couple blockers, linebacker comes in, cleans up the play. He opens things up for other guys. Is he a great pass rusher? No, he's not, but he can push the pocket. I have seen and read stuff about, they most likely either trading him or releasing him because they really like the two young defensive tackles. Man, my thing is, someone throw cold water on me to revive me. My thing is, are you really thinking straight to say that? Shy Tuttle and Malcolm Roach, I think, are good in that rotation that you can take out your frontline guys, bring them in, they give you some quality snaps. And, in at times, Malcolm played pretty well last year, and Shy Tuttle's been a solid player. The Saints, if they get rid of Malcom Brown, are going to have to bring in a starting defensive tackle. Malcom Brown ain't making a ton of money at $5 million a year, so don't tell me it's salary cap related. $5 million for a starting defensive tackle in this league? Now, what we don't know behind the scenes, did they maybe try to extend Malcom Brown, and maybe the agent and the Saints came to a deal? Listen, let's take a look around and see what's out there on the market. Malcom Brown, you're going to have to bring in somebody to replace him. Malcolm Roach, Shy Tuttle, they're great in the rotation, and there is a niche for both of them in the NFL. But we're talking about starting players here. And listen, I've read that not only once or twice, I've read that numerous times. My thing is, you have got to be kidding me to think that the Saints are going. If something happens to Malcolm, and this is reminiscent a little bit of the Darren Sproles deal, that at first the Saints were going to cut loose Darren Sproles. If you remember right,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden there was a lot of interest in Darren, and then Mickey pulled him off there and said, no, maybe we can make a trade. And then he dealt him off to the Eagles. And we went through quite a few running backs before, and filling in moccasin was pretty big of Sproles, who ended up being a good player for the Eagles when he was healthy. I mean, he was still a really good player there.
Yeah.
And you think about Malcolm, he's not making a ton of money at $5 million a year. That's not a ton of money for a starting defensive tackle in this league. And so that's an area, if you trade him or you release him, you are going to have to look to bring in a starting defensive tackle. And tell me a starting defensive tackle you're going to bring in less than $5 million.
Mike, I don't. But the one question I would ask as a follow-up is this the reality the Saints are facing, where they might need to make rotational guys starters because they need to save $5 million, and that's what it's going to take to get under the cap?
Okay, Matt, I'll make you a deal.
Okay.
If Malcom Brown is released or traded, I guarantee they bring in either through the draft or free agency another starting defensive tackle.
Okay. I'm not, Mike. I'm with you.
I get where
you're
going, but they're not going to go with Malcolm or Shy as the starter. They're going to have to go out and get a starting defensive tackle. That's my kick on it, okay? And again, I'm not part of the negotiations. Neither is anyone else. That's Mickey and Kai and Sean, along with Malcolm's agent. Now, were there maybe some talks of let's maybe extend the deal, and maybe Malcolm's camp felt, hey, maybe let us look around and see what's out there, and if not, we'll come back. And could that be a situation also? But to think that you're to that point, I think is a false dream. You're going to have to go out and draft or trade or sign a free agent starting defensive tackle. I think you got to that point. And $5 million is not a ton of money in today's world. It's not.
Mike, I'm glad you went to defensive tackle. So Onyemata restructures.
Yep.
They've got Tuttle and Roach.
He's on the do not touch list.
Right. There's no doubt. What about where does that leave Sheldon Rankins? Is this a player who you think that they'll be able to afford re-signing, what the market might command, what he might command on the market?
I think there's going to be, with 32 teams or 31 other teams, he's going to get a better offer somewhere else.
Okay.
Financially. But really, David and Sheldon play the same position.
So, I'm just defensive line is the one spot, Mike, that I'll look at over and over again. I'm like, I like the first couple guys, but I don't know what you do with numbers based on what the defections may be. It's why this becomes really more interesting the more as we go.
And here's the thing: you've got a lot invested in Davenport.
Yeah.
You got a lot invested in him. You understand what Cam brings to the table, who I think is still a really good player in this league. The guy they're really counting on now is really Carl Granderson.
Yeah, for sure.
Because with Trey, man, that money's going to be, come on, a pass rusher in today's world? Man, all you hear is the dollar signs clicking for an agent. Man, he's hearing it banging in his head of how much money that Trey is going to be able to get out on the open market. And listen, this is not the electoral college. You looking for one team that's going to be willing to do it. And similar to Sheldon, you may have 15 teams sort of in the same realm, but there's going to be one that's going to pay you more than the next guy. And so is that where you want to go with this? And so I agree with you. The big strength of this defensively has been their talent and their depth along the defensive line, which they built up good depth, because that's hard to come by today. That's hard to get a Carl Granderson. That's hard to get a Malcolm Roach, Shy Tuttle. They can come in and give you those quality snaps and because you need your starters for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Because that's when you need to get sick them. Go get them. I think that's why it gives you so much hope, too, for LSU when you're talking about them. When you look at this football team, is there another area, when you look at it, talent, depth, experience, defensive line? Man, LSU got some talent up front. Man, if I'm Andre Carter, I'm like, man, did I hit the gold mine here? Look what I've got to work with along this defensive line. It's really going to be the strength of LSU's team of having some of the returning bigger men like Glenn Logan, Neil Farrell. You got some of the younger guys out on the edge with a B.J. Ojolari, with Ali Gay. And you and I both didn't think Ali would return. You looked at him and man, that guy, he's going to play in the NFL. And, Andre Anthony really came through for him last year. I know he plays outside linebacker, but he's really a hybrid pass rusher. You look at who played really well down the stretch, Jaqueline Roy. I mean, he did a really good job for a true freshman. Hopefully you can get the weight down on Guillory. Already, you're hearing Coach O talk about Mason Smith sort of the same way he talked about Jaqueline Roy. And so, man, you got a lot of cats up front and guys that can play. And so that's big. And that was the strength of the Saints defensively, that you had that 7-8 man rotation that could come after you sort of in waves. You got a lot of unknowns now because, again, if you lose Rankins, who was at one time a starter, and something happens to Malcom Brown, who was a starter, and you're going to lose Trey, and that's three big cogs out of the lineup along your defensive line. I got a better chance to find a rotational guy than I got a chance to find somebody like Trey or Sheldon or Malcolm that can play. It's just not that simple, especially big men. Those guys are difficult to come by. So I agree with you. That's some question marks there, which was at one time you could make a pretty strong argument for talent and for depth. It was defensive line, right, for the Saints.
Let's start on Twitter. Mike.mark Shelton says, ask Mike, how does the lack of a combine hurt teams in their talent evaluation this year?
If you're a coach that gets involved, it hurts that way. You have all the tape in the world you need on a player. You're going to get the medicals. So from a scouting standpoint, it really has very little effect. Now, if you're a coach that wants chalk in his hand, and some of them got it, it hurts you because you're not being able to sort of compare. And so, but from a scouting standpoint, it has very little effect. Very little. You've got all the film, all the breakdowns on it. You're going to get the medicals. What more do you need? But if you got a coach, and they got plenty of them in this world, that sort of stick their nose in it, and a lot of them, that affects them.
Alex Klump says, ask Mike, where does Eric Gilbert end up this fall?
I have no idea. Man, listen, if I had a dart, I could throw it. But that is one of the most peculiar stories that I've seen it from a recruiting standpoint that I wouldn't even care to take a guess.
Ask Mike, Russell Wilson destination, Saints or the field?
I think that field is pretty short. I think it's the Saints and another team.
Okay.
I think it's a 50-50 shot. I don't see him returning to Seattle. So I think it's 50-50 here. I do know one thing about the head coach. If he wants someone, he will move a lot of heavy machinery and dirt to get him. We've seen it. We've seen it.
William says, ask Mike, what would be your max offer for Wilson? He says, what wouldn't you be willing to give up?
Well, I would give up 2 first-round picks and 2 significant players. There are some players defensively. I'm not giving up Onyemata. I'm not giving up Ramczyk. I'm not giving up Kamara. There are some other players on the board that I would be open to. The one I would really hate to give up with is Lattimore, and the reasoning why is you are paper thin at corner with 2 aging corners already, and one of them signed, one of them's unsigned, and Jackrabbit,
Mm-hmm.
So, man, if you get rid of that, and you got some holes here across the board, But if it came down to that, I'd swallow hard and say, I'll do it because I need him to make me a big-time contender.
Let's jump to the text line. Brent H. says, Matt, please ask Mike about Taysom Hill maybe playing some tight end, maybe a way to get him more involved.
I would not be surprised at that. Listen, and I've told him this because we've done a couple different junctions together. Bobby always says, man, he'd be a great safety. I told him, listen, I don't want you playing defense. I want you with the ball in your hands. I think he could be a really good H-back if needed be. I think he could do that. Now, I'm not sure how crazy he would be about that, but I think he could be a really good H-back, power guy. And, boy, when he gets those wheels turning, he's fast, really fast.
Ask Mike, this is from Mitch via text. Ask Mike, is Marcus Williams a Saint next year?
Yes.
Ask Mike, who's the starting quarterback for LSU and the Saints game 1 from Jack?
Oh, Saints would be a real dart throw, but healthy Miles Brennan.
Joey Edwards, what about Kyle Rudolph after he was cut?
I would like Kyle. Now, I don't know what kind of finances he's looking for, but I think he'd be a great fit for this offense. I wish this would have happened 2 years ago. He made that catch.
He wouldn't have made the catch against the Saints.
Wouldn't have made that catch.
Good point.
That's
good
all
point.
I know. Somebody else might have, but it wouldn't have been him.
Good point.
I'm a big fan of Kyle Rudolph. He's a big target receiver who knows how to work that short intermediate area very well, sure-handed. It just got to the point with finances, and they used this early second on Irv Smith Jr., that, everybody's looking at that same contract mirror.
Yeah.
But it's going to be difficult. I'm not saying the Saints can't do it, but I think he's going to have plenty of suitors on his hands.
He's Mike Detillier. He's on our hands every Thursday, and we're thrilled to have him. SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, the MND Draft Report. Mike D, as always, thanks, man. We'll do it again next week.
Thank you, Matthew.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.